HVI's line of ALT series AC Hipots are designed for dielectric withstand testing for aerial lifts, booms, bucket trucks and liners, as well as other electrical apparatus. Standard models are rated from 130 kV to 300 kV and come with a range of features for safety, ease of use, and portability. Features for the ALT series include continuously adjustable voltage, zero start and external interlock safety provisions, and transit-protected meters designed for the rigors of in-field use. Select models also feature capacitive current compensation, lowering the power input required for the device. In this video, we'll be reviewing the control and display features of an ALT 130 unit, getting set up for a test, testing with a grounded return, testing with a guarded return, an explanation of how these return modes differ, and what happens during test failures. Control and display features. The main power switch for the ALT series is located in the bottom of the panel. When turned on, the display light will illuminate in red. ALT series Hipots have on and off LED indicators for the high voltage circuit. When the device has the main power turned on, but the high voltage circuit is not energized, the display light for off will illuminate in green, meaning safe. When safety conditions are met, the high voltage circuit can be turned on, which will illuminate the on display light in red, meaning caution. The ALT series Hipots have two main meter displays, a voltmeter and a current meter, each with their own range switch. The voltmeter is located in the top of the panel. When the high voltage circuit is energized and activated, it displays the voltage level. The meter has three display ranges, which are controlled by the voltmeter range switch, directly to the left of the voltmeter. The switch has low and high ranges for two different outputs, a 60 kV tap and a 130 kV tap. When the switch is set to low range for the 60 kV tap, for voltages up to 30 kV, the voltage is read from the very bottom scale. When the switch is set to high range for the 60 kV tap, for voltages up to 60 kV, the voltage is read from the middle scale. Before you switch over to the 130 kV tap ranges, you will first need to power down the device and change your high voltage output connections. The middle scale is also used when the switch is set to low range for the 130 kV tap, for voltages up to 60 kV. When the switch is set to high range for the 130 kV tap, for voltages up to 130 kV, the meter is read from the very top scale. The current meter is located in the center of the control panel. When voltage is applied in a testing situation, the current meter displays the level of secondary load current being drawn by the device under test, or DUT. The current meter has four display ranges, which are controlled by the current meter range switch. When the switch is set all the way to the right, from microamperes, the meter can display currents from 0 to 250 microamperes and is read from the bottom scale. When the switch is set to the ×1 scale for milliamperes, the meter can display currents from 0 to 1 milliamperes and is read from the top scale. When the switch is set to the ×10 scale, the meter can display current from 0 to 10 milliamperes. When the switch is set to the ×100 scale, the meter can display current from 0 to 100 milliamperes. ALT series Hipots have three lead connections, one for ground, one for load return, and a customer-supplied high-voltage lead connection. The ground connection is located in the top right of the panel. The ground connection is an important safety element and is used to properly ground the entire device. The load return connection is located at the bottom of the panel and is used to return any current from the DUT through the current meter. ALT series Hipots have two return modes, which are controlled by the return mode switch, located at the bottom of the panel, directly to the right of the current meter switch. When the device is set to ground position, the current running through the ground lead and return lead will display in the current meter. When the device is set to guard position, the current going to ground is shunted around the current meter, and only the current through the load return lead is displayed. ALT series Hipots have an output dial located on the right side of the control panel. When safety conditions are met and the high voltage circuit is energized, the output dial will control the amount of voltage being applied to the DUT. The output dial also functions as a zero-start interlock, one of two safety features for the device. The output dial must be at 0 to energize the high-voltage circuit. With a zero-start interlock, the high-voltage circuit cannot be energized unless the level of voltage is initially dialed down to 0. ALT series units also have an external interlock, the second of the two safety features for the device. The external interlock is located at the top of the control panel, immediately to the right of the voltmeter. When the interlock key is not secured into the external interlock, the high-voltage circuit will not function by design, even if the output dial is set to 0. The interlock key is compatible with different manual-operated switches, such as thumb switches or foot pedals. These optional accessories allow the external interlock to function as a dead man switch. Only when the switch or pedal is actively depressed will the high-voltage circuit function. The moment the switch or pedal is no longer depressed, the high-voltage circuit will turn off. Getting set up. For aerial lift testing, there's a range of specific tests you could use an ALT series for. Please refer to the user manual for more information and setup diagrams of specific tests and their connection points. We'll refer more generally in this video to the high side and low side of the DUT. Move the ALT series Hipot to a location that allows for an easy view of display meters and a safe distance away from the DUT. We recommend that the control unit is placed at least 10 feet away from the DUT, as well as the separate high-voltage section, which should be removed entirely from the hand truck and placed away from both the DUT and the control unit. Make sure you are wearing personal protection equipment, or PPE. Make sure the device controls are off, and all dials are set back fully to counterclockwise positions. Follow all local safety regulations and practices in your workplace. First, use the supplied interconnect cable to connect the main control panel and the high-voltage section. Now, start to make your connections to the ground. First, connect the ground test lead to the upper right side of the panel on the ground post. The other end of the ground test lead has a black booted alligator clip. Ground the ALT series device to a solid earth ground with the alligator clamp. Repeat the process for the high-voltage section using the included secondary ground lead. At this point, choose which output tap you will use to connect to the DUT, as well as a suitable connection lead. This connection lead is customer supplied. Refer to the user manual for further information and recommendations on choosing a connection lead. Secure the high-voltage connection lead to the high side of the DUT, making sure that there is enough clearance to grounded objects for the supplied test voltage. Now, connect your load return lead from the DUT to the main control panel. The load return lead also has a black booted alligator clip. Connect it to the low side of the DUT. Return from the low side of the DUT to the load return post by attaching the load return lead to the connection post on the control panel. Make note of how the return mode switch is set. See the guard ground explanation later in this video, or the user manual for which return mode is appropriate for different settings. Now, ensure the external interlock key is in place. Please note, the high-voltage circuit cannot be energized without the external interlock in place. Finally, Use the supplied power cord for the main control unit to connect to a grounded power source. You've now properly connected the high voltage section to the main control panel, grounded the two sections of the ALT130, connected the high voltage connection lead to the high side of the DUT, and connected the return lead from the low side of the DUT to the control panel. Recheck your connections and that there is sufficient distance between the DUT, the high voltage section, and the main control panel, as well as 3 feet of distance between the cables and any grounded objects. Testing with a grounded return. Once set up, double-check that the voltage output setting is in 0 position and that the interlock key is secured in the external interlock. Check that the ground lead is securely connected to a grounding element. Check that the return lead is connected to the low side of the DUT, and that the high voltage output cable is connected to the high side. Check that the return mode switch is set to ground position. Check that the voltmeter range matches the output tap selection. Check that the current meter is at the highest range setting. Turn on the main power button. When the device is initially powered, the main power light will illuminate red. The ALT series device will indicate the high voltage circuit is currently off by illuminating high voltage circuit LED in green. Make sure the voltage output is dialed to 0. When the voltage output is set to 0 and the external interlock is in place, press the high voltage circuit on button. The high voltage circuit is now energized. Once the high voltage circuit has energized, slowly turn the voltage output clockwise to increase the supplied voltage. The voltmeter will now display the voltage. Raise the voltage to the intended amount for the DUT. Now note the amount of current that's displayed in the current meter. If the current meter display doesn't move much, switch to a lower range for optimal readability, to ×10 or ×1. When the meter display settles between 0 and 1, measure the amount of current as indicated by the meter. Now, set the timer for the desired test duration for the specific test. Timers will vary slightly in operation based on specific models. Refer to the user manual for additional information on the operation of the timers. Maintain the required voltage for the duration of the test. When the timer has counted down to 0, an alarm will sound indicating the test duration is complete. When the test duration is complete, turn down the high voltage output to 0. Press the high voltage circuit off button to deactivate high voltage. Double-check that the voltmeter is reading 0. Finally, confirm the high voltage section is grounded, and then disconnect the output lead from the DUT. Testing with a guarded return. For certain tests, you may want to measure withstand capabilities by measuring only the current that flows through the return lead, and not any of the current going through the ground lead. The use of guarded return feature allows for very accurate current measurements in such cases. When in grounded return, the current meter will read all current to ground, internal and external to the test set. This current might include corona, surface tracking, and shunt resistance. The typical diagram for grounded return operation is shown in Diagram 1. When the output return is set to guarded mode, however, the current meter will only read current through the DUT. The DUT must be isolated from ground on the low side, as shown in Diagram 2. Note that the current to ground is returned after the meter. For tests such as these, follow all the basic setup and safety checks you would for a test with grounded return. Recheck all your safety provisions and your cable connections. Turn the control panel unit on and set your timer. Before activating the high voltage circuit on button, change the return mode switch over to guarded return. Now, run the test for the intended duration, the same way as shown before for grounded return mode. When the timer sounds, Power down the unit. About test failures. ALT series Hipots feature an internal overload relay as one final safety feature. The relay is found in the primary circuit and is sensitive to primary current overloads. The overload is set to 120% of the rated output. Anything beyond the overload limit, and the relay will power down the high voltage circuit to protect the device and personnel. Conclusion. This was the product video for the ALT series of AC Hipots used for dielectric testing of aerial lifts, booms, bucket trucks and liners, and other general apparatus. If you have any further questions, consult the user manual or contact sales@hvinc.com. Thank you for choosing HVI and 3 generations of engineering excellence.